dogs were hot, and the WWF did a TV in Nashville. Jerry Jarrett calls me. I hadn't talked to Jerry Jarrett 10, 15 years, I don't know. And he said, my son is working on top here. He said, I think he has a lot to offer the business. He has done everything that he can in this territory, and I think he needs to take that next step. And he said, you know, I know they don't have a lot of big guys up there, but he said, I'm hoping that he would be considered. And he said, can I use you as kind of the first step to see if there's any interest? So Jerry and Jeff came down to a TV in Nashville. I remember today, the lunchroom was one level down in that building. We went down and spent a couple of hours together. In fact, it was either that night or the next day, I went and had breakfast with him and kind of rekindled some of the stories about Kamal and how all that happened. And and I looked at Jeff, and I'd seen a lot of success stories in the business of second generation wrestlers that come along that have learned to respect the business, the respect for the fundamentals. I mean, he was raised the right way. He worked on top in Memphis and Nashville, so certainly he had the ability to be given an opportunity. So I pushed to get Jeff a job in New York for Jeff and for the business, not for Jerry. Would I have been happy to see him get it, and happy for Jerry too, because Jerry been good to me? Yes, but that would not have been the reason why. I would not have taken someone who did not have talent, try to get him a job as a favor to somebody, because I was in a position that you just couldn't afford to do that. And so I recommended Jeff for, I think, all the right reasons. Jeff got his foot in the door, and whatever happened after that is, with Jeff and with Vince and whatever's transpired after that. But I think Jeff is an asset to the business. He's a sharp kid, and certainly learned respect for the business through his father. And as a result of Jeff coming on board, my relationship with Jerry Jarrett resurged, and we started talking on a regular basis. And I respected how much Jerry had been a survivor in the business. When all the regional promoters died, Jerry survived. And when Vince thought he was going to jail, I said, there's a guy in Memphis who has an operation like yours on a much, much smaller scale, who, like you, has his fingers in every aspect of the business, from the production of the TV. He's been an innovator in music videos. He's been an innovator in some of the characters and the matches that he's done when everybody else said he's crazy. But he's survived when others haven't. And I said, I think it ended up that Vince, I didn't really have a master plan in mind, but it was like, Vince, maybe you ought to talk to him. And so it started as, give me his number, and it started as a phone call. And Vince would do that. He would call like Jerry Jarrett on a Sunday, and it started with 1 hour phone calls. Then it was 3 hour phone calls. And because Jerry could relate to everything that was going on with Vince's business. So when it came time that Vince was convinced that this was coming to a head, that he may well be found guilty in due time, he made arrangements to have Jerry move up to Memphis, or move up from Memphis, or Jerry actually lives in Nashville, up to Connecticut. And Jerry lived at the house with Vince for, I know it was over a month, probably 2 months. And Jerry had carte blanche to everything in the company. And Jerry was brought in, really, I think, to basically run the wrestling operation with help from, because it was such a big operation. Pat was still continuing to do what he was doing, I was doing what I was doing. But Jerry, because his experience from the overall overview of all the business was so much, broader than Pat's or mine, that Jerry was a great candidate for that. So he was brought up there for that reason. And then when the acquittal came down, now here's Jerry. Jerry stayed on, and Jerry made a lot of positive contributions. There was a lot of little things, because Jerry was used to being in a small operation with small money. And as an example, it would tear Jerry apart. Two blocks away, Jerry stayed after he stayed with Vince for a couple of months, he moved into a hotel by the week or something. And it was a hotel that the office had to deal with. And Jerry one day looked at what they were paying for his room. Now, granted, up in that part of the country, everything is unreal sometimes in terms of numbers. But Jerry thought, my God, this can't be right. So Jerry went down the street to another motel and said, I have a group of people that come in here on a regular basis. And went through a whole presentation of guys coming in, and he said, what's your normal rate? What would you charge me? Well, the rate was, if Jerry was paying $100 a day there, this guy was $65. Jerry said, this hotel and that hotel is virtually no difference. Why is this company paying $100 for me to stay here? I can get these rooms down here for $65. So now Jerry goes back to the place that he's staying, and he went in to see the manager and said the same pitch. And he said, what would you, so the guy came down, and again, it was like $70. Well, Jerry says, well, I'm glad to hear that, because he says, I've been staying here with the WWF, and I'm charging $100. Oh, no, that's the deal with the WWF. Well, Jerry said, well, why is that the deal? The deal, if you can afford to do it and make money at 70, why am I paying 100? Well, that's the deal, and I'm not budgeting. So Jerry says, okay. So he went to Vince and he says, we're going to move our business down here because this is what's going to save you. And then the guy from the first hotel called Jerry and said, I've changed my mind, and Jerry said, no. So that was where Jerry had his own business. Vince's business had grown so much that I think Vince lost sight of some of those small things. That is that going to make or break the WWF? No. But why should they pay $60 or $65 here and pay $100 up there? And there was nobody paying attention to those kind of details. And those were the kind of things that, because Jerry had to do those things to stay in business. So he had a very, very positive effect for the time that he was there. And they went from a losing year to a year the following year where they made money. And then Jerry could see that his role was not defined like it was at one time. And he had a son that was a senior captain of the football team, playing football every Friday night. And Vince flew him home every night to go to the football game and back every weekend. And then it's just like, Vince, why are you paying to do this? There's nothing more I can do to help you. And Jerry went home, and Vince continued to pay him for like a year.
Sounds kind of like Jerry got what Shane and Stephanie were too young to do at the time.
Yeah, probably. But I also think, and again, it's just a personal opinion, I think bringing family in, Vince was always a talent as an announcer, but there was a perception of him in one way as an announcer that different from him as a talent, where he physically got involved and became a wrestler. And the same thing with Stephanie and Shane. And again, they're a family that had a house, not a home, never took vacations, never did anything together, and that was their choice. And that's not to say that I'm right and they're wrong. It's a decision, but it's, my personal thing is I believe in a more balanced life, which is why I would want to trade places with Vince. Has Vince been a success? Oh, absolutely.
Now, the trial that resulted in the drug tests, what were your role in the drug tests?
At the time of the trial, I think the company felt that Vince should be completely removed from that. In other words, and they hired a drug program advisor. The program was written. I was the administrator of the program, and then they sent out this letter to the IOC and the Major League Baseball and the NFL and the National Hockey League and everybody that, we're holding our wrestlers to a higher standard, and this is the policy. This is the world-renowned drug program administrator, and this is the person who's administrator.
Did you feel put you in a bad position in the company as far as like your relationship with the talent went?
As I look back, I wish I hadn't been involved in it.
What did you think about how the drug tests were administered? Was it a good system?
I can't comment and won't comment on
Okay. All right. And then after all that happened, you went on to be the VP of Talent Relations, right?
I was VP of Talent Relations at the time that Pat went on hiatus, because that had been his role when Terry Garvin had left the company. So I don't remember what the time frame was, but it was. I was there 7.5 years. This is 4 years, and for a period of time, which I think would have been the WrestleMania in Indianapolis, it was just Vince and I. Now there was a lot of other people there, but the creative was pretty much just the two of us at that point.
Watch thousands of exclusive shoot interviews right now on TitleMatchNetwork.com.